For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Good morning. Shares in Asia Pacific slightly lower this morning as the world leaders are gathering in Bali at the G7. The news this morning, the Polish authorities said a Russian-made missile killed 2 citizens in Poland. They're calling it an isolated incident, and the blame has not necessarily been attached to Moscow. The Nikkei reversed earlier losses. Topics also, the Kospi did quite well as well. The Hang Seng and the Hang Seng Tech have fallen about 1%, and Shanghai's down marginally as well. So the composite index of all that region is down about 0.5% altogether. The FBI says it's extremely concerned about China's influence on TikTok, on US users from TikTok. It builds on concerns from government officials and members of Congress who've expressed a great deal of skepticism about the ability of the Chinese-owned video platform to protect US user information from an adversarial government. That's their words. US recap. S&P closes higher after another lighter than expected inflation report. The Nasdaq up 1.4% on Wall Street last night. The Dow Jones up 56.22. I did note yesterday that it's a bit slim actually this week as far as corporate news is concerned. But the major indexes rallied after the producer price index, which often tends to be a preferred thing for economists to have a look at rather than the headline rate, showed a 0.2% increase over the month as opposed to an expected 0.4. So maybe inflation is peaking in the United States. Walmart has lifted its guidance as richer consumers go to it to go bargain hunting. We talked yesterday about the jobs that Amazon was laying off. It started doing it at the Alexa unit in the cloud gaming division at the moment, and the company's actually moving quite aggressively as it gets less from its from ad revenues. Apple is going to source some of its processors from a factory in Arizona rather than buying them from Taiwan. If Apple were to buy processors manufactured in the US, and if they were to go ahead with this in a full kind of way, it would represent a significant diversification, that's how the company's putting it, from their supply chain away from Taiwan. Google is paying a record $391 million privacy settlement to settle allegations about how it collects data from users. Apparently, the data giant tracked the location of users who had actually opted out of location services on their devices. That's according to 40 US states, and it's the largest privacy-related multi-state settlement in US history. Going back to this idea of on-sourcing and resourcing and close shoring and all the rest of it of things, deglobalization is not an option. That's according to the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. He said this along with the Singapore Deputy Prime Minister at G7. It's very, very complicated what they're trying to get to here. As you know, he made a one-day visit to China a couple of weeks ago. They're taking. He says that there should be a united stance on working with China, but also they need to remain committed to diversification. Often these are nothing but protectionism in disguise. Yeah, well, I think most people would agree with that. But it's a very, very delicate balance that needs to be. So some of your production needs to be onshored, and some of it presumably still coming from China. UK inflation latest. Again, this is, I think it's a 41-year high, close to 41 years, 11.1% as opposed to an expected 10.7%. That's food plus energy costs plus the cost of raw materials. From the G20, the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has told bosses to rein in their pay awards, and that he's hoping that tomorrow's autumn statement will help rebuild the party, and he's also criticised the nurses in the UK for demanding a double-digit increase. The thing about curbing wage rises is that a lot of boardrooms are concerned that British listed companies can't match the kind of wages that their global rivals can actually award. The UK regulator Ofcom, further pressure on social media sites. This is on companies like Twitter and TikTok and others. They want the social media sites to reveal the so-called secrets of their algorithms, and to try to stop young users being fed news that, as it puts it, drives them to extremes. Education probably do that as well, wouldn't it, really? Oil, basically treading water. Just prices are quite choppy. None of the big issues about where COVID's going in China, or whether indeed the Fed is going to pause its tightening, have actually caused. And I think one thing that we should not forget is the failure of FTX, which is gradually, people are seeing the damage. In this country and throughout the world, millions of people are owed money by the failure of FTX. I mean, there are all sorts of allegations about what's been on with the company, one of which is that it actually suffered a hack, taking millions of dollars from crypto. And of course, crypto assets are basically unregulated. And experts and financial watchdogs warn that there's little protection for consumers. I would agree with that. That is the global view.
I mean, Michael, I agree with that too, because if you read the story deeply of FTX, very, very shambolic story. Young man, 30 years of age, no regulation, gave about 10 billion to his girlfriend that was trading, in another exchange, and she blew the 10 billion. And $10 billion, she blew it, and it cascaded into a big fright all over the crypto world today. Very sad occurrence. I want you to sound off for that. And secondly, now there are tightening measures. Rishi Sunak was saying in Indonesia that business leaders should be able to cut their pay and all of that. I mean, what's the sense in that? And secondly, I would also ask, like I asked yesterday, they are pushing for more cuts. Jeremy Hunt's pushing for more cuts. We don't even know an exact figure of what we're dealing with here in the UK.
No,
is this safe to say UK is doing voodoo economics?
I don't think anybody knows any exact figures about anything, quite honestly, and least of which the so-called black hole. Again, I mean, really, what we're heading towards is a financial tightening. Number one, it's a restoration of the UK as a credit-worthy place to invest, and if Sunak and Hunt are being seen towards promoting that, then I feel that's as far as we can go. I mean, we can make guesses about the black hole, but I suspect that tomorrow, after we've seen what the figures are, there still will be those saying, well, it doesn't exist, or it's bigger than they thought it was, and so on. So I really feel as though these are very, very difficult things to actually to decide on at one particular time, because there are so many moving parts to calculating what these so-called black holes are. I'm sorry, I can't be. I'm just trying to be honest with you, and I think I'm not an economist, but I think most economists would actually agree it is very, very difficult to work out what black holes are. I mean, I can give you an example. For example, the GDP figures in this country are still being revised from the 1960s. That's more than 50 years ago. I mean, that's how crazy, international and national statistics actually are. It really depends where you're coming from. But I think that if the markets can be seen to be quieted, if the gilt markets can be seen to be quieted slightly, then that will have done its job. As far as FTX is concerned, yes, I'm sure there'll be more stuff crawling out of the woodwork. And yes, we've said this 100 times, haven't we, on this program? The fact that it's not regulated, and I still feel as though this erodes its journey. It slows its journey into being mainstream. I'm convinced that Bitcoin, that cryptos do have a place somewhere in the system, but where that is right now, when you see the likes of him making so much money and losing so much money, it's really, really difficult.
Okay, quickly, let me start with cryptocurrency, FTX, which has caused a tsunami-like disruption crisis within that industry. 32 billion worth of value, but all of that gone up in smoke, more or less. Last Friday, FTX had to file for bankruptcy. This has also affected Salt Blockchain, BlockFi, so all of these companies are affected. And investors are making claims. Over 100,000 of them have done so. The court has also asked FTX to provide the list of 50 topmost creditors. Is there any hope that these investors will get anything back? Are we witnessing a Benny Madoff moment, another Ponzi scheme, another financial crisis similar to that of 2008? That's one. Number two, Poland. Now, currencies, started faltering after that report of the attack on the village on the border between Ukraine and Poland. Now, the safe haven dollar, has appreciated slightly, but other currencies have gone down. The stocks, as you pointed out, Asian stocks fell by about 0.4%. Now, what is likely to happen? Is Poland likely to invoke Article 4 of the NATO treaty? And if they do so, would the leaders of NATO be able to solve this? And would there be no escalation, not requiring having to invoke Article 5, which Article 5 of the NATO treaty talks about joint action? 3, tomorrow, the autumn Thursday statement by the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt. Who are the likely losers and winners that we're likely to see when that Thursday statement, autumn Thursday statement, is announced?
I think we'll all be losers from tomorrow. I think it will be very serious and it will be very painful. And it's the longer term thing is if the Treasury and the Finance Minister or the Chancellor are seen to be being really tough on the kind of problems that are, let's face it, the UK is not alone in this. Every country is facing this. Every country is apart from the United States, which we're not quite clear about, which I'll come on to in a second, is experiencing rapidly rising inflation. And if it's not, then it's being hidden because the consumers in the United States are finding even there that petrol pump prices are rising, and that has a real effect. So who will get? But I don't think there will be any winners. The only winners long term might be the credit worthiness of the UK economy, which is actually quite a small one, really. But it always tends to punch above its weight. And I think that if this sort of credit worthiness can be restored, then I feel as though that will be a positive. But individually, I think we'll all be losers. The dollar, well, yeah. I mean, from what the members of NATO are saying at the G20, they have been extraordinarily slow to place blame on anybody. So they are teetering, if you like, on the edge of getting involved, but they're trying not to for all the obvious reasons. That's all I can say. I'm just looking at the reports right now, and nobody is actually being totally blamed for this right now. You can have your own suspicions about it, but nobody is really being officially blamed for it right now. I'm sure that Ukraine would like Moscow to be blamed for it, but for the moment, the NATO powers are actually holding back, and they are in a very good place to do that because they can all have face-to-face meetings, which no doubt they will have further on. As far as the dollar's concerned, I think you would expect it to rise when there is international tension like this. I get that. But actually what's really been happening is the fact that the dollar has actually been declining, and it's been declining because it's felt that the rate of rate increases by the Fed is actually slowing down. Remember, I brought what Lael Brainard said yesterday. She's the vice chair of the Fed, and she's not dovish by any stretch of the imagination. Yet she was saying yesterday that she feels as though the pace is slowing down, and the yen appreciated earlier in the trading day on the back of a slightly weaker dollar. So there's lots going on. It's not just about this accidental or intended missile strike in Poland. It's a dollar actually weakening, or rather losing the kind of its strength it's had. As far as FTX is concerned, yeah, I mean, as I was saying earlier, who knows what's going to come out of the woodwork? Do you think all those years ago the South Sea bubble actually stopped people investing in in shares. It didn't, did it? I mean, it was seen as what it was. It was a bubble, and a lot of people lost a lot of money. Did the great crash in Wall Street cause people not to invest in equities? No, it did not. Did Black Wednesday and Black Monday and Black Thursday and Black Friday, well, come to think of it, all those black days, did that stop people investing in equities? No, it did not. I still, as I keep saying, I think that cryptos probably will be there. I think they will have their ups and downs. There will be lots of retail investors who get burnt horribly by them, and they won't achieve what they want to achieve until we don't even notice that they're there, and they're buried deep within the mechanism of payment. I think until that stage is actually reached, it's not an asset as far as I'm concerned. But then again, I tend to shy away from things that I don't understand, and I really don't understand cryptos.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you very much.